She vanished in Paris with a stranger. Said she'd found herself. I didn't argue. I just walked away. But she forgot one thing. I controlled every piece of her escape. Now she's stranded, silent. Until weeks later, a message lands in my inbox. It's from him. And what he tells me changes everything. We landed at Charles de Gaulle just after 8 a.m., and she stepped off the plane like she was starring in a film. She wore sunglasses, though we hadn't seen the sun since Iceland, and carried herself like the airport terminal was a runway. I followed with the bags. She didn't offer to help. Customs took 15 minutes. She charmed the officer with a few words of high school French, tossed her hair, and flashed the smile she reserved for people who didn't know her. He barely looked at my passport before stamping it. As we walked away, she turned to me and said, "Paris always felt like a second home, doesn't it? It was our first time here." I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, but because I knew it was a line rehearsed in her head, the kind of thing she thought someone interesting might say. Everything about her felt curated lately. A performance built from Instagram captions and travel blogs. I used to know when she was acting. Now, I wasn't sure she ever stopped. The taxi from the airport to the Marais district passed in silence. She stared out the window, smiling at things she didn't comment on. I watched her reflection more than the city. I was trying to read the gaps. Our hotel was a narrow building with ivy curling around the front, and a cracked blue door that looked charming enough to be expensive. She lit up as we entered the lobby, threw her scarf on the velvet settee, ran her hand along the marble desk. "It's perfect," she said, without looking at me. I chose it because it had one entrance, one exit, and full digital key control tied to my name. Upstairs, she took the bigger closet and both drawers. I let her. There was no point in small battles anymore. I hung 2 shirts and left the rest in my suitcase. We had 6 nights booked. I knew we wouldn't use them all. We hit the streets by noon. I suggested lunch, but she said she wasn't hungry. Instead, we wandered. Or rather, she did. I just stayed close enough to make it look mutual. She darted toward markets, wine shops, bookstores, taking pictures of things she didn't buy. She laughed easily, but never at anything I said. And every few minutes, the phone appeared again. She checked it like it was oxygen. Quick glances, short taps, a micro smile that she didn't bother to hide. I asked once if it was work. She said, "Just catching up with people." Plural. No names. We passed the Seine in the afternoon. The bridges were full of tourists and painters. One man, seated on a folding stool, had a half-finished portrait resting against an easel. He wore a linen shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled up, and his beard looked accidental. She slowed. He looked up. They exchanged a glance that lasted too long. She walked straight toward him. I stopped 10 feet away and watched them talk. His name was Matthew. I learned that later. He gestured with his hands as he spoke, paint under his fingernails. She nodded like she understood every word. Then she reached out and touched his forearm, not like an accident, but like punctuation. She laughed. Not the light kind. The kind she used to save for when she wanted to be remembered. When she came back, she handed me a sketch. It was of us. Or rather, a version of us. I looked tired. She looked alive. "Gift from a local genius," she said, eyes still on him. "He's got an incredible eye." I said nothing. She seemed disappointed that I didn't ask questions. That evening, I made dinner reservations near the Eiffel Tower, view included. She barely looked up from her phone during the walk there. When she did, it was to point out a wine bar she said. Looked more authentic. I didn't remind her I'd researched this place for days. We sat by the window. She ordered for both of us. She always did when she wanted to signal disinterest in my opinion. I let her. She drank quickly, ate slowly, and didn't ask about my food once. During dessert, her phone buzzed again. She checked it under the table but didn't hide her smile this time. That smile cut. It wasn't vague anymore. It was recognition. I leaned back and said, "You've seemed distracted since we got here." She looked up unbothered. "It's just Paris," she said. "There's so much to take in." I nodded. "There is." On the walk back, we passed Matthew again. He was still painting. Or maybe he'd come back, knowing we might. She stopped. I kept walking. She called after me, said she'd catch up. My jaw clenched, but I didn't break stride. I unlocked the hotel room. She returned 40 minutes later, smelling faintly of turpentine and rosemary. She kicked off her shoes, didn't meet my eyes, and climbed into bed facing away from me. I lay there beside her, watching the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths. The silence between us was no longer temporary. It was structural. I closed my eyes and made a mental inventory. Hotel, reserved in my name. Flight, same. Travel wallet, tied to my account. All access, technically mine. She hadn't asked once how any of it worked. She assumed I would handle it. I always did. But I wasn't feeling generous anymore. She came to Paris looking for a fantasy. She forgot I built the foundation beneath her feet. It was our third night in Paris when she broke the illusion. Or maybe she just stopped pretending I was still part of it. We'd spent the day at the Musée d'Orsay, or rather, I had. She peeled off halfway through the second floor, claiming she needed fresh air. Too many tourists, she said. Too loud. I want to see something real. She didn't invite me. I finished the museum alone, trying to concentrate on brushstrokes while wondering which cafe she was sitting in, or who she was sitting with. She came back to the hotel just before 6. Her cheeks were flushed, and her lipstick smudged at one corner. She smelled like something unfamiliar, expensive, foreign, earthy. I asked if she had a good afternoon. She nodded and said, "Wandering helps me think." Then she kissed me lightly on the mouth, like I was a cousin. That night, I had booked a dinner cruise, something scenic, safe, romantic, if we still knew what that meant. She got dressed without comment, wearing the green dress that used to make her blush when I looked at her too long. Now she wore it like armor. She didn't ask how she looked. She didn't have to. She knew. The boat glided down the Seine like a ghost. She stared out at the lights of the city, as if she'd already left it. I tried small talk. I tried wine. I tried touching her hand. Nothing held. Her body was present, but her mind had exited the frame. Halfway through the main course, she set down her fork and exhaled like a confession was coming. I braced, but it still hit harder than expected. "I'm not coming home with you," she said, soft but deliberate. I didn't respond right away. The waiter appeared, oblivious, and asked if we'd like dessert. I declined. She asked for another glass of wine. The silence returned. When he left, she looked at me fully for the first time all evening. Her eyes were clear, cold, not angry, just done. "I've met someone," she said, like it was inevitable. "His name is Matthew. He makes me feel awake." I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because nodding helped me hold my face still. "You and we've been fading for a long time. You know that," she continued. "I tried to make it work, I really did. But it's like living with a schedule. Everything planned, predictable, safe." The word safe stung more than any accusation. I'd built her safety. I'd protected her from the chaos she once begged me to shield her from. Now she wore it like a prison. "You want someone exciting," I said. "I want someone alive," she corrected. I picked up my water glass, took a measured sip, and set it down. "How long have you been planning this?" Her expression flickered for the first time. "That's not fair." "I didn't ask if it was fair," I said. "I asked how long." She looked away, then back. "A week, maybe 2. It wasn't a plan. It just happened." I almost laughed, but I didn't. I stayed quiet, because that's what she expected me not to do. She wanted a scene. She wanted tears or rage, some proof that she still mattered enough to hurt. Instead, I folded my napkin, laid it neatly on the table, and said, "If that's your decision, I won't stop you." She blinked, caught off guard. "You're not even going to ask me to stay?" "No," I said, "because I know what it means when someone uses a vacation to escape their life and finds a distraction that feels like freedom. I've read the script." She narrowed her eyes. "You always talk like you're above everything, like nothing touches you." "Wrong," I said, calm as a cut. "I just don't break in front of people who already left." That landed. She sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You really don't feel anything, do you?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second I saw the girl I married. The one who danced barefoot in our kitchen. The one who cried when her father hugged her goodbye on our wedding day. The one who told me once, long ago, that I made her feel like she was finally home. Then I blinked, and she was gone. "I feel plenty," I said. "I just process it differently than you. I don't hand it to strangers with paintbrushes." Her face hardened. "You're cruel." "No," I replied. "I'm precise." The boat docked a few minutes later. She didn't speak. We walked off together, but not beside each other. She kept checking her phone, thumb flicking in rhythmic desperation. No doubt Matthew was waiting somewhere, promising a freedom she'd confuse with meaning, for a little while. Outside the dock, she turned to me. I'll get my own place. I don't expect to stay in the hotel. You're welcome to figure that out, I said, letting the sentence hang. She didn't catch the edge in it. Not yet. We shared a cab back to the hotel in silence. At the front door, she paused and said, You're really not going to fight for me? I looked her dead in the eye. You're mistaking my silence for surrender. Don't confuse the two. Then I walked in, left her standing outside, and went straight to the room. She came up 10 minutes later and started packing. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't offer help. By midnight, she was gone. She thought she'd walked away with the upper hand. What she didn't realize, what she never once considered, was that everything she thought she owned in Paris was built on my infrastructure. Her room, her flight, her digital wallet, all registered under my name, all centralized quietly by design. She thought I was weak because I didn't scream. But my silence was never surrender. It was strategy. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Not a sigh, just a quiet release, the kind you make when you realize the performance is over. She left the room smelling like her new self, spice and citrus and something synthetic. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. The truth had already vacated long before her suitcase followed. I sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 60 seconds. Then I stood, opened my laptop, and began. It took less than an hour to dismantle the world she thought she had control of. The hotel room was booked in my name. Hers was listed as additional guest. I opened the app, tapped modify reservation, and changed the checkout date from Saturday to tomorrow morning. Then I removed her name from the guest list entirely. Next, the travel wallet. I'd set it up 6 weeks ago, joint access, loaded with enough euros to make Paris comfortable. She never bothered to learn how it worked. She assumed I'd refill it like I refilled everything else. I logged in, transferred the balance to my personal card, and revoked her digital key. In less than 2 minutes her access was gone. She'd wake up with a screen full of error messages. The airline was next. I pulled up the return flight, Saturday evening, nonstop to JFK, 2 seats in business class. I cancelled both. Then I rebooked mine for tomorrow morning. First class, aisle seat, full recline. Hers? Nothing. No record. No reservation. Just a gaping hole where certainty used to be. I moved through each task methodically, without rage, without vindictiveness. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. She had rewritten the rules of our marriage mid-game and expected me to keep playing blind. But I'd been taking notes for months. She used to joke that I was too prepared for real life, that I always had backup plans, contingency folders, travel spreadsheets. I took it as a compliment. Now I saw it for what it was, foreshadowing. She wasn't bored of my structure. She was threatened by it. Because deep down, she knew she could never build anything half as stable. Destruction was easier. I paused halfway through and looked around the room. Her scarf was still on the chair. Her perfume bottle on the sink. A paperback novel face down on the nightstand, untouched, like most things she said she loved. I didn't touch her things. I didn't pack them or hide them. I wasn't going to clean up her mess anymore. Let her realize the consequences organically. I slept lightly that night, if you could call it sleep. My brain stayed alert, scanning memories like a forensic analyst. Her late nights out with coworkers, the new passwords on her phone, the sudden interest in foreign films and moody playlists. I hadn't ignored the signs. I'd archived them. At the time, I told myself I was overthinking. Now I saw it differently. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I showered, shaved, and dressed with care. Not because I was hoping to be seen, but because I needed to feel composed. There's something sacred in reclaiming routine. I folded my clothes neatly into my carry-on, zipped it with finality, and left the room just before 6. At the front desk, I stopped. I'd like to remove one name from my reservation, I said, handing over the card. The clerk checked the screen. Ah, yes. The other guest is no longer staying with you. No, I said. She won't be needing anything further. He nodded. Would you like her personal items held for pickup? No, I said, with a small, polite smile. Let housekeeping deal with it. Outside, the sky was pale blue, the streets still damp from overnight rain. Paris was quiet at that hour. Honest, for the first time since we arrived, I felt like I could breathe in it. At the airport, I moved through security like a ghost. No baggage to check, no one waiting for me. Just a boarding pass with my name printed clean and alone. I stopped at the lounge briefly, ordered a coffee, and watched the sun rise behind the runway. My phone buzzed once. Her name on the screen. I didn't open it. She called. I silenced it. Another message. Where did the booking go? I can't get into the room. Then another. The card isn't working. Did you change something? I turned the phone face down. 10 minutes later. Can you please just explain? I think something's wrong. I left it on the table and walked to my gate. Boarding was smooth. The seat was wide, soft, angled for rest. I leaned back and watched as the city grew smaller through the window. My phone buzzed one last time before takeoff. I read it. Please, we need to talk. This isn't funny. It wasn't. And I wasn't laughing. But I smiled anyway, as the plane lifted off and the skyline vanished behind me. Let her talk to Matthew. Let him explain how freedom comes without Wi-Fi, without euros, without a place to sleep in a foreign city. She told me she wanted to feel alive. Let her. By the time I reached my apartment, the city had shifted into late afternoon haze. I stood at the doorway for a moment longer than necessary before unlocking it. The air inside was still, undisturbed. The silence wasn't peaceful yet, but it was honest. No footsteps in the hallway. No suitcase half-packed. No artificial perfume clouding the entrance. Just stillness. I set my bag down and walked straight to the kitchen. I didn't unpack. I didn't shower. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, letting the exhaustion settle into my joints. It wasn't jet lag. It was the heaviness of emotional gravity finally catching up to my body. The apartment looked exactly as we left it. One mug in the sink. Her scarf still hanging from the back of the chair where she'd flung it last week. I left it there. Let the ghosts linger if they want to. I wasn't cleaning around them. The next day I worked. Emails, meetings, deadlines, all of it mechanical but necessary. I didn't mention the trip. No one asked? Most people assumed we were still in Paris. I let them. It was 2 days later when I heard from her again, indirectly. An email from the hotel manager. Short, polite, a little strained. Mr. Whitman, your companion has returned to the hotel, claiming there's been a mistake with her reservation. As her name is no longer listed under your booking and the room is checked out, we were unable to accommodate her request. She seemed confused. Please advise. I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing the laptop. I didn't respond. She was confused? Good. Let that confusion settle in her chest and grow roots. Let her feel what it's like to ask for something and be denied without drama. Just cold, bureaucratic indifference. By the end of the week, mutual friends began reaching out. Carefully worded messages, all circling the same question without saying it outright. Hey, I heard you came back early? Everything okay with the trip? I ignored most of them. The ones I trusted, I answered simply. We needed different things. One of her friends, Lila, the one who always seemed too curious by half, called me directly. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message I didn't listen to. I didn't need to. I knew what it would be, sympathy laced with implication. An offer to talk. A veiled attempt to fish for details, to find out if the rumors were true. If I'd really left her in Paris without a return flight. The truth had started to leak. I let it. The second weekend home, I found myself alone on the balcony, staring out at the skyline, trying to make peace with the silence. I thought about the first time we danced in the kitchen of this apartment, how she'd played some terrible French pop song and spun in circles until she made herself dizzy. She collapsed into my chest laughing, wine sloshing onto the floor. I wanted that version of her to be real. I held on to her for too long. Not because she was still here, but because I couldn't quite admit she'd been gone long before Paris. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Not a text, not an email. A real letter, handwritten, postmarked from a Paris arrondissement. No return address. I unfolded it carefully. Her handwriting was still the same, rounded, too neat, like she was always trying to make a good impression. The letter was short, apologetic, but not for the reasons that mattered. She didn't apologize for abandoning our marriage, or for belittling the man who built the safety she now scorned. She apologized for the drama, for the mess, for how things had escalated. Not once did she use the word betrayal. But what caught me, what made my fingers still as I read it, was the line at the end. I don't think I understood the consequences of walking away from something structured. I thought it would feel like freedom. Instead, it just feels like I'm floating. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not to keep, not to cherish, just to remember. People like her never fall. They drift. And they expect you to catch them when they do. She'd expected me to stay under her, cushioning the descent. Instead, I'd stepped aside. 3 weeks passed before I heard her voice again. Not in person. Not on the phone. Through a mutual friend, Eric, who hadn't yet realized he was no longer neutral ground. We were sitting in a corner booth at a quiet bar near my office, the kind of place where the music stays low and the drinks arrive strong. He didn't bring her up right away. We talked work, the Knicks, a little about his sister's engagement, but eventually it surfaced. She called me last night, he said, stirring his glass though there was nothing left in it. From Paris. Still there. I nodded, kept my hands still on the table. How's she doing? He hesitated, longer than I liked, confused, embarrassed. She said she didn't think you'd actually. He trailed off, trying to find a word that wouldn't sound like betrayal. Leave. I didn't blink. She left first. I just formalized it. He studied me for a moment, like he didn't recognize this version of me yet. She thought you'd fight. That was her miscalculation. She's not doing well, he said. Not just the money. The mess. She said something about losing the return flight, the hotel, even her phone line stopped working. I shut off the international plan. I said. She wasn't on the account anymore. Eric gave a low whistle. Cold. No. I said. Clean. He didn't press after that. And we didn't meet again for a while. I didn't give anyone else updates. I didn't post about it. No cryptic quotes or passive-aggressive retweets. I just resumed my life, quietly, deliberately. But it took time. The apartment didn't feel like mine at first. Too many fingerprints still visible. Her scar stayed on the chair for a month before I finally tossed it into the donation pile. I kept waiting for her ghost to show up in small ways, smells, music, the clink of a glass in the wrong cabinet. But she faded slower than that. Not in moments, in patterns. Some nights I'd reach for my phone, thumb hovering over her name, out of habit more than want. I never pressed it. I never called. Because the thing about habits is, once you see them clearly, you can choose. I went back to the gym. Not to get revenge, or glow up, or whatever self-help cliches people sell. I went because the act of lifting something heavy and putting it down again felt like control. Predictable. Measurable. And I needed that. Something I could manage. Something I could build. On a Sunday morning in early April, I took a walk past the bakery we used to frequent. She loved the pain no chocolate. I used to joke it was the only French she ever pronounced correctly. I walked past the window and saw the same man behind the counter. He looked up, paused, then smiled and nodded. I nodded back. And just like that, the weight in my chest loosened by an inch. Not gone, but less jagged. 2 months after Paris, I got a letter from her attorney. Short, formal, asking to begin separation paperwork. No mention of the trip. No mention of Matthew. Just a request to divide assets amicably and respectfully. I didn't hesitate. I called my lawyer the same day. We'd already had the documents ready, quietly, meticulously. My finances were clean. She wasn't entitled to anything tied to post-separation earnings. The joint account had been closed 2 weeks after I got home. The apartment lease? In my name alone. She'd been gone for 91 days by the time the paperwork was filed. I knew because I'd counted each one. Not as a countdown, just as a record. A log of distance. A measurement of recovery. In the middle of May, her name finally disappeared from the shared cloud calendar we hadn't used in months. No notification. Just a gap where her color used to be. That hit harder than I expected. But grief doesn't arrive on schedule. It shows up in quiet edits. I saw Eric again not long after that. He said she was back in the States, living with her sister. No sign of Matthew. She talk about Paris? I asked. She doesn't talk much at all. I nodded. That tracks. He tilted his head. You miss her? I didn't answer right away. Then, I missed the version of her that existed before she got bored. He let that hang in the air a moment. Do you think she regrets it? Doesn't matter. I said. I'm not holding space for her regret. Because here's the truth no one tells you about survival. It doesn't come in waves. It comes in choices. Quiet ones. Hard ones. And you don't always feel better right away. Sometimes you just feel awake. I don't hate her. Not anymore. But I don't carry her either. And maybe that's the most honest closure there is. It was a Thursday in June when the final thread unraveled. I was on a conference call, half listening to a logistics report, when an email came through from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line. Just a single sentence in the preview. I'm not who she told you I was. I opened it. The message was brief. No pleasantries. No signature. But the name in the sender line was unmistakable. Matthew Delorme. I read it 3 times, then leaned back in my chair and muted the call. He wrote in crisp, formal English. Polite. Almost academic. Said he debated reaching out, but in the end, thought I deserved clarity. He wasn't some bohemian painter living off the grid. He wasn't even French. His parents were from Lyon, yes, but he was born in New Jersey. He'd moved to Paris after a messy split from his own fiancée. The art was part-time. Mostly, he worked in digital branding, startups, a few influencer contracts. He'd met her near the Seine because she approached him, not the other way around. She told him she was trapped, miserable, that I was controlling, cold, and prone to emotional outbursts, that she felt unsafe, unheard, unloved, that she needed help getting away. He said he believed her, at first. They spent 2 nights together. The first was exhilarating, he admitted. The second unsettling. She drank too much, cried too easily, became possessive, demanded more than he was willing to give. When she realized he wasn't going to offer her a romantic escape hatch, she turned cold, accused him of using her, then begged him not to leave. He left anyway. The next morning, she was locked out of her hotel. He'd assumed I did it out of cruelty. But weeks later, after replaying their conversations, after watching her spiral publicly online in cryptic posts and deleted photos, he began to suspect something else. She's not who she pretends to be, he wrote. You probably know that better than anyone. But I wanted to say, I didn't take her from you. She left on her own. She just didn't know where to go. That last line stuck with me all day. She didn't know where to go. And the man she bet it all on turned out to be as temporary as her impulses. I didn't reply to his message. There was nothing to say. He wasn't the enemy. He was another casualty. That night, I opened the drawer where I'd stored her letter. I read it once more, slower this time. Trying to find sincerity between the lines. There wasn't any. Just longing dressed in nostalgia. Just a woman trying to narrate herself as a victim in a story she'd authored. I shredded it. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because now I knew the final truth. Even her betrayal wasn't original. Just another borrowed fantasy she couldn't sustain. She wasn't claimed. She was abandoned again. And this time, I wasn't the one left cleaning it up.